Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today the podcast is joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp, Jacob Allen, and Kyle Krieghbaum as we review Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. We've reviewed every single MonsterVerse film on the podcast up to date, and we continue that legacy by jumping into this film. When Kong discovers a new threat in Hollow Earth, it is up to him and Godzilla to team up to save the planet once again. We discuss not only how this film works, but also we discuss the future of the MonsterVerse, a very confusing prospect that is definitely up in the air. We debate different ideas for it and give our own pitches and decide if this film is a step in the right direction or not. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and now let's get to our review of Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire.
For most of human civilization, we believed that life could only exist on the surface of our planet. What else were we wrong about?
Okay, and to kick us off, I'm going to go to you first, Jack, the guy with no face here, the guy with no name, because we've been on this podcast and we've talked about every single feature film in the MonsterVerse. We haven't quite dived into TV. Peace and Love, I don't think we're going to dive into our TV retrospective of all their shows that they do on all their platforms. But Godzilla x Kong, what were your thoughts, Jack? Did this finally give you like your favorite MonsterVerse film? Like, is this finally doing it for you? Because I know you've been kind of mixed so far in the series.
It's crazy to think that we did this, I think it's 3 years ago almost, to when we did the last episode on ClapperCast. I think me, you, and Paul Price did it. I think I might be missing one or two others, but I think we came to sort of the same conclusion. We didn't really know where this was going to go, and this was sort of done. Because I remember in the press, they were like, you know, if something crops up, we'll head that direction. But at the moment, there's nothing in development. And then fast forward 3 years, they've had a quite successful Apple TV partnership that's going to go on to do more things in the press as well, and then this. So to say I wasn't sort of hyped for this would be a shock. I'm pleasantly surprised with this, considering how, on reflection, reading back my review of its predecessor, how much I didn't like it, and having watched it sort of maybe halfway through again, and seeing bits and pieces that I really quite like, and other pieces that I really dislike. I've sort of come to the same conclusion of that it's always the human characters here that they can't seem to get right. And watching this in the cinema, this improves on everything of what Adam Wingard's predecessor did, but still doesn't take that extra step. So all the worries that I had with the characters, and this is a lot lighter than the in literal sense and thematically, compared to that predecessor where it's quite dark, it's quite gritty. This one makes it feel like that 80s throwback, which I sort of quite like, but you know, it's here and nor there talking about King Kong and Godzilla. This was a lot more fun to witness on a spectacle level. My issue here is just like the predecessor. Where's the evolution? If you look it back, and I hope this is said by everyone here, because after watching it, I couldn't get it out of my head. This is the exact film, even into narrative level, of Kong and Godzilla. Exactly the same. They've got rid of a few characters and brought a few more in. But ultimately, the same narrative goes. They have a third party excess over here. They have to battle each other. They go there. There's a young girl that's like a professor that she's in between the two. We've got Rebecca Hall, and she's got a love interest who's sort of in the circle, but not in the circle. And then we've got like this CGI mess, and we have like them going down to the Hollow Earth. I feel like the exact same issues we've got here is with this. There's just no narrative evolution. That being said, price of admission, I think this is undoubtedly worth it. I think I paid £6 to watch this, which is about $8-9. I think visually, I think this is fantastic. I think Adam Wingard really can block. He can do a really good scene composition. But granted, these are two massive CGI monsters. It was nice to see them, you know, in different colors, different color grades. There's different type of skins and stuff. But it did feel like a PlayStation version of like, all right, we're just going to give it a new skin of paint. Like everyone says about like FIFA or Madden or Call of Duty, it's the same shit every year. It's just a different skin. This felt similar, but I did find more out of this. But it'd be interesting to what everyone else thought. But for me, where I ask the question, where does this go now? Like, we've got the 80s throwback. We had the dark Batman vs Superman predecessor beforehand. Where are we going here? Because Monarch, from the bits I've seen, sort of impressed me, but I feel like it's come to a full circle now. So I feel like I'm like deja vu here, but I enjoyed it for the most part. But this has massive issues about feeling just empty to me again compared to what we've seen beforehand. But I'll throw it over to someone else because I'll be interested.
Jacob, I know by your faces, I believe you disagree with some of the statements made. So maybe you want to go next.
I feel like this was the most miserable MonsterVerse film to sit through for me. I felt the exact. I do feel, building on what Jack said, just that idea of this was the same movie with the same beats. I do get that, but it just felt more. Everything felt more episodic about it, and just the Netflix version of. Yeah, I do really like the comparison of Godzilla versus Kong to kind of that Batman versus Superman. I actually thought they did Godzilla versus Kong better. It's like, oh, you have these two titans. How are they going to work? And then it wasn't. They team up, but right, Godzilla has to beat Kong first, and Kong almost dies. And it was like, okay, so he beat him, and then they kind of come together. And then this, I mean, I guess I'll start. You don't go to a Godzilla Kong film for the story, but when the human characters are bringing the film down this much, I thought that was an issue. I've always been a Dan Stevens fan since Downton Abbey, so he is good here. He's not enough to save the human aspect to it. There is that 80s theme. I like the music in it. I mean, I just like the songs. I don't know if it was it almost didn't feel consistent with the needle drops. They kind of happen and then they kind of stop and then they kind of start again. But that was fine. I mean, I do think though, you have Rebecca Hall and the daughter. I have her name. I'll come back to her name, but Haley something. Which I think those two are the most compelling story. I just don't think it's told right or in a way that's kind of interesting on the screen. I do think that kind of mother-daughter relationship could have been built on, and then obviously the girl has the relationship with Kong that is kind of there, but sidelined. It's there more in the last movie. I just thought there's no truly great fight scene in this one. You have a few. I didn't think there was. I guess where I'll come from is I like King of the Monsters the most. And so the fight scenes. I actually probably like Godzilla versus Kong the most as a whole movie, but I thought the epic battles of Godzilla, I think my problem is that it feels too now this is a Godzilla in name only movie. He's getting sidelined every single one. And I mean, Kong's clearly the main character now, so I do think there is that. But I just thought, I mean, there's parts in these fight scenes where I couldn't tell what was going on anymore because things just kept getting thrown into the camera. And I'm like, is this me or is this, and because, right, you've got the gravity crashing down and then everything. It just was where 2014's Godzilla maybe was too dark. And I think part of that was just the special effects at the time, right? Okay, if we're going to do a large creature, we kind of got to do it dark to make him look better. But now it is 2024 and you can do things kind of in more of that. Feel like CGI in broad daylight works a little better, but this just felt like there was dirt or sand or something always in the way of the actual shot. Everything was so low versus kind of high. They seemed everything seemed small. But I want to just go on two Kong scenes. There's the first one, the underground fight where they kind of team up against Kong. I thought that had me out of my seat. I did like that one. And then there is a little bit of the character of Kong here that we learn in the opening. He's running. You kind of see he's got a toothache. You see just the character of him there. And then there is another one where he has to fight some guys and he pushes one off the cliff and he grabs him. and you see kind of the humanity of Kong. He pulls him up, and then the ape goes to try to kill Kong, and Kong just drop kicks him off. I thought that was a cool part, but also just kind of that character of Kong. I think they should lean into more of that. But overall, I thought this was, I mean, it's long. There's just, it's repetitive. It felt just over and over. And yeah, just going back to the center of the earth, it did feel like, okay, this is Kong versus Godzilla. But every time it just was like, well, I don't like this as much as, right, Mecha Godzilla, or I don't like this as much as the center of the earth with having to recharge Godzilla, or just the visuals of the lava in the middle. Everything felt a little less. So I guess I'll just stop there for now. But no, this was not, as a fan of, I'd say, every MonsterVerse movie, whether just liked it enough. So King of the Monsters, I liked the fight scenes enough. The last one I thought was good, but I think, I don't know, Adam Wingard and company, I don't think, maybe it is just was rushed, but this was a miserable sit through for me.
Kyle, what were your thoughts on the film?
God, how do I follow that up? So my thoughts are somewhere in between both of you. I am somewhere in the middle. I do think that this is the worst MonsterVerse movie. I do. And I will heavily disagree with Jack when he says that the spectacle carries it, because I thought visually this was kind of ugly. I thought the visual effects weren't up to snuff a lot of the time. I thought that the composition with human characters was sometimes horribly flat in terms of lighting, sometimes very green screened. I will say I'm human. When I see King Kong get a big robot hand, I want to cheer. It's awesome. There is some fun stuff during the fight scenes for sure. It's just presentationally, I found this very repetitive at a point. I found it very lifeless at a point. And I agree with Jack. I was like, okay, is this what we're doing again? Same structure again with the monster, and they're enemies, and then they have to team up to fight a larger threat. Like, it doesn't feel like there's anywhere to go from here. It doesn't feel like we're building towards anything in particular. I wasn't miserable watching this at all, but I did think that it was significantly weaker than I wanted it to be. And it was carried by some of the monster fights, which I know you go to this movie for the monster fights. You just hope that there is some connective tissue stuff to bring it together. And like Jacob said, the human stuff, it isn't just that it's there, it's that it brings it down. It's that the humor is super flat and not funny. It's that the character work just is not up to snuff for what it needs to be. So those are my base thoughts going in.
I think I'm probably similar to you, Kyle, but ultimately, like, I just hate the MonsterVerse so much that this is immediately my second favorite of the franchise. I mean, I think Godzilla versus Kong is like awful, one of the worst films I've seen. I think Kong Skull Island's bad. I think King of Monsters is bad. I think Gareth Edwards delivers a 3-star film like he always does with Godzilla. He doesn't go above that. He doesn't go below that. Exactly what I expect from that director. This film is pretty much everything you guys have said. I mean, like, the actual story, the narrative, the drama, the humans, they're all awful. Like, absolutely, dare I say, some of the worst the MonsterVerse has seen. It's comedically bad, not in the sense of you're having fun with how stupid it is, but it's comedically bad, just like how actually embarrassing it is that we're in 2024 and you're putting these characters in this drama. And even just like the lighting and scenes, like, I think it's so over the top trying to take itself seriously at times, and it just fails completely. What I will say works for me, though, is the action here. For the first time in a very long time in this franchise, it's fun, right? Like, I'm sorry, you can go on Twitter and you can see every good scene in this movie, to be clear, but you can go on Twitter and see Kong grabbing the little thing and hitting the other guy, the Godzilla or whatever, and like, that's pretty good. Like, this is fun. And I will say, for someone who had no hopes for the MonsterVerse, I do think they're starting to lean into this being just dumb fun. And as someone who still goes to every Fast and Furious film and has a great time, because all I want is dumb car action in those films, I expect nothing more. If you want to turn this into dumb monkey Godzilla action and that's just all we get, great. But like, I can't overstress enough, though, that those are 5-minute chunks here and there, and there's an entire movie around it, which is complete and utter shit. I don't think the villain is good, the Scar King or whatever. I think he is really boring. I think that the dialogue is like god awful. Thank God we don't have Millie Bobby Brown here anymore. That's a plus. But overall, I just look at this film just as really quick opening thoughts, and like, it is a terrible film, but it's kind of fun. And for this franchise, that's enough to be one of the best. So congratulations, Godzilla X Kong. You know, I have to kind of give you a kind of like thumbs up, because I do think you could have fun with this film, unlike other ones in the franchise.
If I could just add to that, right? Because this is interesting, because Jacob said it, Kyle said it, and now you said it, right? This thing about dumb fun it gets brought up, right? And throughout this, and it's not going to be a wild tangent. I think it's actually quite an interesting point. I would say that to myself, but for the first hour of this, I'm watching it, I'm thinking, oh, okay, like I'm enjoying this, and I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, why? I'm asking myself why, and after the fact, it's hard not to see this as a replication of everything else. So we added the Batman vs Superman thing for its predecessor. I think it's totally appropriate, because that's where they went with it. This feels like a mutilation of everything the producers have seen to be fun and added in. So when I'm watching this and I'm watching Dan Stevens, I'm just like, haven't I just seen that in the Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling? Like, haven't I just like literally seen him like literally in that type of shirt and Nice Guys? Why are we compare? I find myself like looking at things and like, so now we're comparing it to like the MCU. We're bringing stuff together. We're making baddies. We're making a MonsterVerse, etc. I get granted the MCU is always going to be comparable when we're looking at a saga in fruition, but ultimately it's the only thing that's about the DCU. But that died a long time ago. We can't shit on that anymore. That died a long time ago. We have to compare it, and I'm watching it. I'm thinking, I remember having watched like a lot of the early Showa stuff, and then watching that high C stuff, the from the 80s forward, and seeing Godzilla change. I find it interesting that at one point this was a franchise that set the bar, and everything else followed. Bar Kong, which is the Universal thing with the monster stuff. But to me, this always used to it used to set the bar. With Godzilla, and also I think Gareth Edwards watching this now, I would love to know what he thinks truly about this after watching like the very slow, very sensitive, very poignant Godzilla, which nailed sort of the atmosphere of the early Ishiro Honda films, and then watching it now, and he would probably think, Jesus Christ. But back to the point, it's interesting when you see them set the bar, and now this is a franchise that is so out of ideas, it's taking from anywhere. And as I'm watching this, right, and this might be wild to say, but I couldn't get it out of my head. This to me is exactly what happened with Thor. Thor was a mystical god in the MCU, and they played it very serious, very one note, but very serious. And that's where you get Godzilla, Gareth Edwards. Then you get something a bit different, a bit more cool, a bit more abstract, open the world up with Dark World, which is King of the Monsters. And after that, they've had no real idea of what to do with this character. So they brought in a third party to mix it up, which with Thor was Taika Waititi. And what you think about Ragnarok or not, you've got to admit, like, he spiced everything up. He brought a sense of humor to it, and he changed aspects of, let's say, tone and thematic to make it work, but also to make it work in the realm of the MCU as well as a bona fide picture. And I feel like that's the attempt of Kong Skull Island. And then after that, he did Love and Thunder, and they have no idea what to do with that character now. Because what the progression is that it's what Carson said. If you play this as dumb fun, there is absolutely no evolution, because you can't get stupider, because then you condescend the audience, and it just becomes patronizing. Like watching like an ape, like, I don't know, wipe its own arse next. I don't know what we're gonna do, like how we're gonna make it even more stupid, or however we're gonna condescend the audience. But you also then can't go the other way and make it more highbrow, because you lose that audience that you've just managed to gain after COVID. So I feel they're in a really awkward position in what type of audience. The question is, genuinely, what do they do next? Because this takes it in such a direction with the Hollow Earth, which granted is bold. But for me, it's like what we said about Kyle's like, I cannot believe we're doing the same thing. Narratively, we're doing the same thing. And the new lick of paint will only work so long. And granted, I'll be like Carson, and more so than anyone else. I enjoyed the action sequences, but if that's what I'm coming for, like I'm watching the highlight reel, I'm watching the YouTube compilation, I'm not watching a 2-hour film. And to me, it's so clear that Adam Wingard does not want to exercise Godzilla whatsoever. He's so focused on King Kong. I think he's expressed that in interviews as well. Kong's more emotive. But isn't that easy? Isn't that the easy alternate? Like, why not go for the harder thing? Why not try and craft an emotive character or something with Godzilla? That's the hard part. Why not push yourself? So to me, it goes for the easy option. The other thing I want to mention as well, right, very quickly, and what we've all mentioned, is that we talk about this looking like shit, which I think it's got a new look of paint. It's not different to its predecessor whatsoever, but to me, it's brighter. If that makes it any different for anyone else. But this is actually the cheapest film in this franchise to have been made. I think it's 130 million on a budget. That to me is frightening. I don't know how many people worked zero contract hours or never went home for days on end. But for this to be complete the way it is at 130 million, I think it's like more kudos to them. It's not -1 on 15 million. Don't get me wrong, but that's a different labor laws. But 130 million here, they will make money. They'll sell the overseas rights to it. They will make money. So I can understand what they're trying to do. But for me, I look at this, I'm like, it just takes aspects of other things. I would love them to just come out and be like, we're making a Godzilla film, and we're going to make our Godzilla film. We're going to set the bar. And I'll tell you one thing, right? And I don't know if people notice this, because I know we've got one on Uncut Gems who's a fascinated with this franchise. Me, I'm not so much. It is so obvious that they're setting up a Pacific Rim universe with the portals. The blueprint of the arm detail is literally from Pacific Rim as well. So if that's the direction they're going to go, then fair play to it, because they're going to resurrect one dead franchise, which no one went to go watch, with one that's very close to it. So for me, I find that this is probably the end of a lot of things. And if that's said and done, I've somewhat enjoyed these films. I think We Went Back to King of the Monsters is the better one. They should have split that in 2 parts and brought Kong in on the second part, and actually made Ghidorah. Because at the moment, they've misused Mothra, which came in post production because they used another character and then thought, well, this is actually shite. Let's bring Mothra back. They've misused King Ghidorah. It was like meant to be massive. They've misused Mechagodzilla. To me, they're just going through the motions for a money pit. So if this is it, then fair enough. But for me, I just don't see a next evolution I'll be entertained by, bar the Pacific Rim thing. I'll go watch that for entertainment's sake. But if that's where they're going, to me, maybe it'd probably be best that they focus on the TV aspect and look at the Mutos, that are surprising and interesting and distinctive. Because as what mentioned here, I think the art direction and the production design, very poor, no evolution, same shit. And I'll won't go on. I want to say one thing before I go here. Right, the one thing that really annoyed me here is the one thing I thought they were going to do, and I thought they won't do it. They won't do it. Is Kaylee Hottle, who plays the deaf girl. They literally use her as this exotic example of going back home and like going through the whole 1930s thing about, like, I just think the perception of that is like really a bit muddled, like, because she's got a different dialect and a different skin, that she's like, we're going to take her back home, we're going to bring her all to peace. It feels like that weird like King Kong 1930s 1940s horror trope where we seem to sort of look at different people of ethnicity and somehow they've got magical powers and stuff. I don't know. I think a lot of it's slightly like, oh, if you wanted to get into it, I think a lot of people would it's the least of its issues. But for me, I think it showed how out of tricks this is that we just got no idea what to do with it whatsoever.
I mean, I feel like that's kind of the entire franchise, right? If you look at the Apple TV show, which I only watched like 20 minutes of the first episode, I believe that's really like quite a serious show about like the lore of Monarch, is my understanding of it. So like tonally, what that show is presenting as far as building this quote unquote universe and what this feature is presenting is not really on the same page. You have the Pacific Rim stuff then, which you could bring in. I'm not sure if they are or not, but valid. You blew your load with King of the Monsters with all the famous monsters they could get and just like threw them all in there. There's like a few options of where they could go, but like I just don't see. I mean, we'll talk about this more. Like, I don't see where the future of this lies as far as building. I think what they need to, and like, I don't know, you mentioned like, you can't, this franchise, I mean, is incompetent at writing human characters or human drama. So you can't focus on that side of things. I do think that the -1 is an interesting factor in the future of this, I have to think, considering how successful and how well received that film was. Specifically with like focusing on Godzilla, there's clearly a Godzilla market right now, and I cannot imagine the corporate forces behind this are going to be like, yeah, just throw Godzilla to the side and make another Kong film. But like, I am here, and I think that proved that there's a market for human drama within monster films, which, like, shocker, but like that doesn't really match with where the MonsterVerse is at this point. Like, this franchise, as far as like quote unquote universe, has no direction. It has no characters that you know or care about other than the monsters. Like, there's just nothing here that is building. Like, even Dark Universe with the Mummy built something for the future where, like, okay, I can see a pathway forward. I can see what we're doing here. This franchise has failed at every single step to build something outside of the Hollow Earth, which is like the stupidest thing in the world. So like, I don't know, what are we doing? I have no answers, because the film and the franchise itself seemingly has no answers. And then we're also doing what, like, anime on Netflix for Skull Island, I think, and like, there's no cohesiveness here. There's nothing here that is cohesive. Every part is working individually.
And Monarch feels cut out of this movie.
Right.
She's like, I work for them. I'm not the boss. And then all of a sudden she's the boss. And then, so I'm thinking, wait, if the show is setting up the origins of Monarch, why is modern day Monarch not in this movie, essentially, other than the fact that they talk about, well, the government might shut us down if we don't do a good job. And you go, oh, okay, I thought you were the government. I don't know. I don't understand. It is there. I mean, yeah, there is just an identity crisis here.
And the show just got renewed, didn't it?
Yeah,
we are not leaving Monarch. We just got Monarch season 2.
I cannot tell what was happening there. I don't know.
How can I, as an audience member, and this because I might be the oldest person here, and I don't mind saying that now, I've accepted being 28. How can I seriously accept 10 years ago watching a character go through San Francisco, killing hundreds of thousands, if not a million people, right? And then 10 years later, I'm watching them do a dive off Gibraltar into the sea, and also curling up into the Colosseum. Now, granted, there's an evolution, but I also think it's not a defamation, but it feels like it feels at fault in then accepting of what the sentiments of what Godzilla is. Like, granted, I think you can evolve a character, but there's also have to be an acceptance of what that character is. It is a third-party monster that channels aggression and nuclear energy of a world that's not understanding and not ready to understand it, and also is at the verge of annihilation each time. And this film was like it's taking the energy out of the nuclear reactor in Paris. Sorry, not Paris, in France, which is like, oh, that's interesting, and it's just gearing up for another fight. To me, it's like this is terrible to say, but it is that dumb fun where you've got to go in this without a brain cell. And granted, I don't think there's going to be like a critical analysis of this film compared to like its history. No doubt, I think it's been there, it's done that. But when you compare this to -1, where there's heart, there's soul, there's like a nature to it about a beast and then being evolving, and then trying to take this beast down and focus on human characters. It seemed like trying to create humanity in a character that's not quite ready for it. And granted, I know that I've contradicted myself, because I think you can have an emotion with Godzilla, because it's an animal, it's a beast, it's a god, in the sense that like it's doing something we don't know why it's doing it. Maybe that's it's the nature of the beast, like the scorpion. But even then, I'm watching like this thing murdered, not murdered, but I can't unconsciously kill people. But this thing is a destructive force. We watched in King of the Monsters where King Ghidorah is like rising out from Antarctica, and we've got Rodan in the volcano, like massacred people. And this, he's like, I'm glad Nicolo's not in this, because this monster eradicated Italy. He went through Spain, and then
that's why he's not here. Actually,
yeah, exactly. He's in a day of mourning. Like, I'm just watching, thinking like, I just think it's lost itself in the idea of what the sentiments were, what the tone were, and I don't think you can go back to that now. And that's why I think it's a one-way trip to emptiness, and we're going to get the Love and Thunder, and then after that,
Hollow Earth.
Well, Hollow, yeah.
Hollow Earth. I have two things on Jack's point there. The last movie, it's Godzilla's attacking and they're going, why? And then it turns out it's because I used to joke Godzilla was protecting us from big tech because, right, they were building, this company was building Mecha Godzilla. And, right, so the point is Godzilla always is doing something that looks nefarious, but he's actually saving the Earth. Where this did not feel like that this time. And then two, I felt they chose the wrong locations every time. I'm going, why are we in Egypt with an ice monster? Why are we in Rio right now? It never felt like the right location. A part of me was like, well, why can't we just be in Antarctica or Greenland with ice walls falling down, or like just put them in? It was never the right location, I felt.
Sorry, can we mention how Ridley Scott can't shoot a pyramid in Napoleon, but Godzilla can crash into it and no one has issues?
Don't bring the king into it. Come on. We're not here for that. I'll be here for hours. Come
on. Jack, I think it's interesting your point. I think that the answer to why we've had this evolution, you could say, if you want to call it an evolution, is like just a sign of the incompetence of the filmmakers behind it, to where like this is all the franchise can do, because every person at every step has just been incompetent with this, like as a filmmaker, as a writer, whether that's their fault directly or with the studio. Like Adam Wingard, Peace and Love. I don't know why we're like kind of retroactively being like, I mean, I'm sure he's had some good films, but like he's kind of a shit director, right? Like he made Death Note, you know, he made Blair Witch 2016. Like I'm sure he's like The Guest is good, but like he's not, you know, let's not sit here and be like he's a horror legend. You know,
is he the one that did The Guest with Dan Stevens?
Yeah,
I like that movie a lot.
Well.
It's fun.
Your Next is pretty good.
He's so quirky, right? He has quirks, but I almost wish.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't work in the studio.
I just don't think maybe he's the one to write like intense human drama to build a multiverse or to build a universe, a cinematic universe. Maybe that's the answer, right? Like, I just think at every point, though, every single person has failed to create a compelling thing other than the monsters. So this is all. What could they do right now other than just have this be dumb fun? Like, there's nothing this franchise has proven to be able to do.
To add to that, Carson, as well, like this shouldn't be like, oh, this is shocking news. He's the only director to return. Now, if that doesn't add to your point about them being comfortable and thinking this is the right direction, then I don't really have any hope for them either. Because I think Wingard's thing is, you know, he got to do like a grimy 1980s, 1990s like Godzilla Kong movie. I was like, okay, I didn't like it, but fair enough. He got to have a stamp on it. But him to return back, to me, is a sign of both normalcy and competency, and the fact that they don't really see any more evolution or want to do anymore. They thought that worked. And granted, just because it makes money, you know, there's a sign to say that's a response to, you know, financial success. It's not necessarily critical success. But for me, it's like, I think that these films, after a while, should be then pushed onto someone else. I always thought the director of King of the Monsters got the bad rep, because I think there's a film missing from, especially the Jordan Vogt Roberts one. There feels like there's a lineage missing from there to there, from those two films. Two very different directors, and I think that's the competency of like the DCU without having someone at the top of the top of the ladder. The problem with this is that this has to then report back to Toho. There is no way they're not allowed to do what they're allowed to do without getting permission. They have the license to show who they want to. They don't have license to show what they want to. They have to ask for Mothra, and they're allowed it at the last minute. They're allowed to license King Ghidorah. They're allowed to license Rodan. They do not own them. So it's interesting that this is with a very limited ability that they possibly have. This is what they're going to showcase. And I think, granted, to get two Godzilla films in 1 year after like being alive in 1998, wearing a Godzilla hat, I've got a picture of it. Now, have we been there? We've done that, you know? To see the evolution of this franchise, I just think like you said, I just get really disappointed. Wingard, I don't have a problem with Adam Wingard, but you know what you're going to get. You're going to get The Guest. You're going to get Your Next. You're going to get a very visual-centric, 80s aesthetic, visual, audible, prone to being in horror. The Death Note remake is a prime example of where trying to evolve a Japanese sentiment and also ideal about the world, about society, about religion and stuff like that, about social expectations and social dynamics, and not having pardon my French, but having any fucking idea what to do with it. This is exactly the same. I just think it's a visualization of doing something, but there's nothing behind it. So if they think he's the right man to carry this on, then there'll only be one way to go. But in the same token, they can't get Edwards back. Can't do Godzilla 2. You just can't do it now. I mean, Monarch's the one that everyone's talking about here, but nobody's seen it. And granted, I've been one of them, like, I just, I think it'd be interesting to watch Wyatt Russell and Russell and Kurt Russell. I said Russell Crowe then. That Ridley Scott thing's throwing me off, sorry. But I just think get something really interesting to do it next. Get someone really distinct with a palette. Don't get someone like Colin Trevorrow or someone who's gone from the indie market straight in here. I just don't want to see what's happened to Nia DaCosta and Colin Trevorrow and so on and so forth, and see them just very much like placid entries. I would get someone who's a bit chaotic, a bit chaos, who knows character, who's going to do something here that can work with character, and let the visualization, which is all mocapped beforehand anyway, it's all been done before, let that be done secondary. So I have slight hope, but again, like you said, one thing that really pissed me off with this, and having watched Civil War in a double screening, and my review will come out that really fucked me off, is the needle drops. I can't stand it. I can't stand just having contemporary music over something and like to try to elicit the mood. And I'm like, you've done it 6 times now. It didn't. I don't really know any of these songs. Anyway, if you're gonna get, I know Jacob, you like them. I don't want to shit at all. But for me, it's like,
I did not like the needle drops. I only said, "Oh, I like the music. This does not work, though."
Oh, right. Okay.
I'll give you that.
Fair enough. Because I like a bit of rock and roll. Don't get me wrong. I like it when Guy Ritchie does it. But here, I'm like, where's the score? Where's the theme? Like, -1 was so good with how it used the theme, and here I'm just like, I just find it devoid of answers. But going back to what Carson said about the issues with the director, I don't think it's the incompetence of the director. Because I don't want to shit on him, because I think Adam Wingard does really good composition here, blocking. I mean, it's all, like I said, it's all CGI, don't get me wrong, but it has to be done. I think it's producers here. I think the fact that they have to go Lionsgate and stuff like that, and Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers have to go to Toho and get permission for stuff is an issue. But I also think that there's no clear head of state to dictate, well, we want to go this way, we want to do this. When you watch -1, you can see what that director's looked through the 80s and the 50s, and not this, but the most of the 60s and bit of the 70s, but most of the 80s and early 90s stuff. Here, I've got no idea. I think he's watched Demolition Man and he's read a few comic books and thought, like, I'll do that needle drop. It pains me to talk about this anymore, I think, but I'll let someone else go.
I guess I'll go. I haven't talked for a while. I want to go back to a point you brought up way earlier, Jack. You compared it to Pacific Rim, and I kind of got the vibes of Pacific Rim Uprising when I was watching this movie. And I don't think that the film is as bad as Pacific Rim Uprising, but I do think that it suffers from the same problems, which is taking a franchise that is built on scale and removing the scale in a sense. Yeah, so the final fight through Rio in this movie, it felt like, okay, there is no sense of how big anything is in comparison to the rest. The monsters feel like they are like 10 feet tall. I don't know. It removes any sense of visual grandeur with the size of these creatures.
And it doesn't help that, like, the villain is quite small compared to, like, it's a smaller monkey than, or ape, sorry, excuse me, than than King Kong is. Like, it's just, I don't know, I agree with that. I don't think there's any scale, and there's also no, like, edge. There's no thrillingness. When you can have a doctor just, like, jump into King Kong's mouth and do a tooth remove. Like, I don't know, there's just no edge here. There's no thrill. Like, this used to be a very thrilling at times franchise, right? These characters, that's kind of the point. Is like, they have this edge, and while they're fighting for good, and ultimately, like, you stand Godzilla a lot of the time, like, they're still like these dangerous creatures that are killing people. And I don't know, there's something there to pull you to the edge of your seat and be like, wow, like, I'm kind of like, heart is beating here. There's nothing like that here. It just turns into like fun CGI action with, like, it's just, I don't know, even the Kong emotions, which I think they do a good job bringing emotion to Kong, and like the performance and everything. Like, I just didn't care. Like, I just don't think it's it's not what I want from this character. It just turns him into like this very generic, like, protagonist almost. That's just not interesting, and it's not thrilling, and it's just, I don't know. I agree with that though. There's no scale here. There's no like edge to these characters. It's just like there,
Yeah, like
you know?
say what you will
Ma-
about what Gareth Edwards did with Godzilla. He makes him feel like a god. He makes him feel like this is the biggest thing that has ever happened in the history of the universe. Like, and this movie just has none of that like wonder.
And also, I just don't see why they would though change. Like, you know what I mean? Like, money makes so much. This movie and this franchise makes so much money, even just internationally, much less domestically. Like, there's no reason why they feel the need to elevate it, as Jack kind of mentioned, which makes me like, I don't know. I don't think they necessarily have the capability as a studio, seemingly, to make anything better than this. But like, when there's also no reason to, and they just continue to make money, I think we should just expect. I think we should fully have the anticipation that this is going to be what we get over and over again. I hope they get some better villains. Like, there are some more Godzilla villains that are interesting. I'm gonna mispronounce them. Like, Biolinite is pretty cool.
yes.
Ebra I like a lot, but like outside of probably those two, they kind of, again, as you mentioned, King of the Monsters just did all the cool ones and all the big ones. So like, and I don't think they have the capability to do much interesting original ones considering what they do in this film. So like, I just hope that eventually we can get to the point where like they're cool and each one has this good iconography and like it's unique and there's something captivating there, and it doesn't just turn into like the most boring, stale like Aquaman 2, where it's like, well, you're getting exactly what you think you're going to get and there's nothing interesting here.
Can I just add
Oh,
as
I
well?
like
Oh,
the
go on,
sea
Jacob.
creatures in Aquaman 2.
No, come on. Let's.
But
Come
I
on.
get what you mean.
At the
Sorry,
time, we don't.
go for it, Jack. Go for it, Jack.
No, just to respond to Kyle, right? I want the Godzilla thing. I find really interesting because I think the first Godzilla film, I think it's outstanding. I think it utilizes, like you said, there's a morbid morality with Godzilla in that film, in that when he's on screen, it's not a predictability, but you know what's coming, and it's going to be destruction, and it's going to be death, and that is the greatest thing you can do on cinema by not having to do anything. By the sheer iconography of a character, you feel dread or threat, like Jaws, or another comparison to show him for only 6, 4, 5 minutes. But I think that's brilliant in showing suspense. But the one thing you mentioned there, right, about his size is a really interesting about the ripple effect, in that the importance of showing him that big in that film and showing how minute and the moral issues of like, they can't kill him, he's going to bring destruction, we need to destroy him. But the sheer magnitude of the size is that what makes King of the Monsters, when he goes to Antarctica and you hear the electricity spike up underneath Antarctica, and it's Ghidorah, and you get that image of Ghidorah like just ultimately engulfing that character. That is a great example of setting the tone in one film and then subverting it to make you like, oh my god! Like, if we were scared in the first film, we should be scared now. When I watched this, Godzilla like has got a pink spine. I'm like, okay, that's all I feel. So I don't feel any dread. It's curled up in the Colosseum, like, it's fun. Yeah, I don't feel any dread, right? And I don't want to be like this boomer, like, oh, you can't do this with the characters. I appreciate that there has to be some sort of sentiment of diluting them to sell to a big audience. But when I'm watching Kong and what we've said before about the humanity, what Jacob said, right? He's got grey hair and he's grown his beard out. And I'm sat there thinking, really, the opportunity to do something with these characters, to make them rugged and make them worn and make them, because he has scars over his body. We know there's a history there. We know that he's alone. But that's the same shit we saw in King Kong in 2005. We saw in 1976, and we saw in 1933. Like, come on, like, let's do something with it. Do something different. Do something unique. And the one thing about Pacific Rim Rising, right, is, and I think Kyle has sort of annihilated me here, but I think he's right. Maybe it isn't the producers here, because taking Del Toro, who's a visualized director, granted one of the very few who's on a different level with practical effects and especially iconography, if you take him out of there and you put the same entity in the next film, which is Uprising, but you lose his passion and his understanding of the craft, there's a loss there. And I think the same thing has happened with people who went into this, who adored Godzilla, and then slowly as it's come out, Kong has taken over and there's more interest. But I still think that without Edwards here, who knows a visualization, who knows the visual effects, I think Wingard has said, right, let's put everything on screen. Let's make this as loud as possible because you only get really one chance of making it. Granted, he's got two and he'll probably get the third. But I think it is interesting to see the direction going forward and what they'll choose. But yeah, the scale is so interesting because like when that like little King Kong, little one, the little giddy one, it was weirdly like Scar's kid. If you like look at there's loads of shit here. Like there's loads of stuff opportunities. Like the ice monster. I hope this is not spoiling for anyone, but like that is the reason why King Ghidorah is Antarctica. Like that's amazing lore. Never brought up. Not really bothered about. Like we get to see some cave drawings, and we did that. And like what we did that with King of the Monsters. We've already done that. I don't know. Like to me, I just sound like an old bitter man. I don't want to do, but I have real passion for this franchise, and I think a lot of people do. And I think just to see the same thing reiterated again, I think it's a really disappointing thing. Really disappointing.
Can I say one thing on scale? I think that's why that underground scene when Kong is first introduced to all the tribe, it's because they're underground. They did feel larger because you have lava coming down and they're in a tight space. So I think that's why that scene worked for me, because it was like, oh, they feel the size actually works because you have a tight space with big guys or the big apes versus, just whatever else in the Hollow Earth, right? Okay, they're huge, but they're not huge. I think that's why.
How was that light source in the Hollow Earth as well? Like what? I just look at it. I was like, what?
Thank you, Jack.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Oh,
I don't know. Like I feel like I'm an old bitter man, but I'm watching. I'm like, why am I picking this? Like, do you know what happens, right? And I think it's maybe you agree with me. I don't know anyone, but when I start picking up on the little tiny things, I've lost all interest then, and I've taken myself out. Like for example, how in the fuck does Dan Stevens get back to that ship in the space of 20 minutes when nobody moves off that cliff and they're in exactly the same positions? I'm just sat there thinking I shouldn't really be picking that sort of shit up, but because I'm so sort of pushed away from it because I don't care, I'm finding fault with it, and I really do sort of like berate myself for doing that because I should be in there watching just like King Kong and Godzilla in 2024 fighting each other at the pyramids. And if you say that to someone, there's this effect where you go, that sounds quite interesting, and you watch it and it's like, okay, it sort of breaks my heart a little bit. But I don't want someone to talk positive for a bit because I feel like I'm shit on this thing.
Well, in terms of the positives, again, we go back to the monster fights because those are the thing. The second that they give Godzilla or King Kong the robot hand, I think that whole fight. I think the fight scene I think the fight scene with the pyramid and him and Godzilla is great. Godzilla straight RKO's him, and I thought I laughed so hard. It, there is fun stuff like that where you're like, it kind of mimics the appeal of like WWE or something. Just these titans beating the crap out of each other. There's fanfare. You'd mentioned that bringing Mothra back was not intended, and that makes sense now that you say it out loud. But I still thought her inclusion was fun and a crowd pleasing moment. I'm a Mothra fan. She's one of my favorites of the universe. So I don't know, like that in those moments, the movie hits what I think it's intending to hit, and it's going to work for those audiences that go in, just wanting that fun. I think the last 25 minutes are quite fun. It's just kind of a grueling grind to get to that point where I'm having fun with the movie.
The kids in my theater loved it, so I'll say that.
Sure,
I mean, I kind of started to realize, okay, that's the point.
I don't think any fucker watched it. Mine. I think Civil War was a lot busier. Dune was massive. This one, I think 130 million. I think will make money back, but it doesn't seem that. I think possibly because once you've done it once beforehand, there's obviously going to be that secondary issue of getting people back, and you need to sort of really look at the material and do something different. I do think that this will get a really poor critical score on Rotten Tomatoes. May even so a commercial score as well with its audience. I just don't think it changes the game too much. But like you said, I think it's just a highlight reel, which is so disappointing. I do want to say one thing though, just for the Matrix stands out there. The guy who plays Ghost in Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions plays a talk show host here. I once saw, I think, Anthony Brandon Wong. Once I saw him, I was like, I know who that is, and it took me ages to figure out who it was, but that was a positive. Just because Kyle started it, I just want to go on to the positives again. But I thought Rebecca Hall was very good, but she's wasting her talent. If anyone's seen Passing on Netflix, her directorial debut, wonderfully poignant, profound piece on entering white society as black women trying to pass. I think it's like, and you look at this, like those are the reasons why those films were made, because you can get the finance for it, you get the funding for it. But she's such a talented actress, and she sells a lot of it here. But like the Volkswagen scene, you just like this constant reminder of like where we are. You get like this material where you see quite emotive, poignant scenes of being displaced, which now feels like more profound than ever. But when they mentioned again, Dan Stevens, about entering a tribe, how long does that take to be disturbed and eradicated by people coming in? There's material here that like, oh, it's really interesting. It catches you for a second, then it's either undercut by comedic entity or like commercial economic greed, prosperity. It's just a sign of the times. You have to get over it. It's like, you have to sort of just agree to it, and I'm like, oh, okay. But for me, it does sort of dilute the fact, because there's a lot of stuff here where I think this is on the verge of being quite an interesting little feature. But I think it just bottles it. Maybe not bottles it. Maybe it doesn't have the mustard to go any further than it does. But yeah, just everything here was,
Well,
the more you talk about it. No, sorry, Kyle, go on.
Not even just Rebecca Hall, but just look at how many famous actors this franchise has wasted in nothing roles. Like King of the Monsters has an incredible cast, and they waste people like Vera Farmiga on like really, really poorly written roles. In this movie, Brian Tyree Henry is one of my favorite up and coming actors, and unfortunately, he is reduced to the really bad comic relief character with like two jokes that they repeat ad nauseum the entire film, and it was a
This
bummer
feels
to
like
see.
it's ruining his career. I'm with you there, Kyle. Oh my goodness.
I know. God.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, Rebecca Hall, every time I see her, I just think about her performance in The Night House, which I think, Jack, you didn't like, sadly.
No,
but,
I
like,
watched that at
great
the time
she's a
of my life,
phenomenal
yeah.
actress. It's
I
fine.
can't remember.
But,
I think I watched it on a plane somewhere. It wasn't a really nice environment.
oh, no, you should watch it. I really like that film.
It's an
But,
awesome film. Yeah.
She's a very.
I mean, it's not. Oh, go for it.
I'll just say, like, but if he doesn't make this film, he can't be in the Causeway. Like, he can't do potential films like Widows, sorry, but the Steve McQueen film. I just think that there's an acceptance now to have to do the highbrow stuff. But I agree with you. I think looking back on these films, it'd be interesting to how this will do on certain careers, because Millie Bobby Brown for me is done, washed. I'm with Damsel, which is ultimate distress. I find myself where there's mass opportunities to work with so many auteurs to bring cinema back down to its level of working with the independent market. And all of them at this point, not necessarily Brian Henry and Rebecca Hall, but Millie Bobby Brown's one, that they all want to go for the commercial success of going into a franchise that's already been done. And I find that when you look at Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen and Gareth Edwards, the fact that they've never brought them back, I don't think is a testament to the producers or that. I think it's the fact that them two don't want to be attached to a franchise. They want to just do that. Granted, I know one's probably going to do Bond, one's just left the MCU allegedly, but I think the two very up and coming performers who were in a film at the right time to boost their career, that also helped the film, because there were somewhat unknowns. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson had been in a few bits and bats, Age of Ultron stuff, but he wasn't a household name. I think even now he's struggled to reclaim that. Elizabeth Olsen the year before was in Old Boy, and then now has just drastically improved into a really interesting actress. You can't say the same here. It's all pre-established stars, so it's hard to look at this and be like, why is Millie Bobby Brown choosing to do this? And I don't know. I think they need to really go back to the drawing board. But I do like Rebecca Hall. I think she's a fabulous actress. Dan Stevens again, like just like trying to do Ryan Gosling. I was like, Jesus Christ, get him to play brothers or something, because it's not working here. And like as a dentist, I don't like the word kaiju either. It annoys me. I don't know why. Him just saying that in a British accent was like, I'm a kaiju dentist. I'm like, what?
I actually quite like Dan Stevens in this. I thought he was hamming it up. I thought he was the right tone.
Oh god, he knew what he was signing on to. He definitely was like, this shit. I know what I'm doing here. It was nice to see a
Yeah.
British accent. My god, not to sound like a nationalist or anything, not coming off like Civil War, but it was so nice to hear a different dialect in these films. Like, it doesn't have to be so heavy American. Like, you're setting all this in Europe, like, let's have some. I think the skin change and the skin color here is very much like um, a great approximation of the talent that they've got. It's not just three white characters in a room screaming. You've got Rachel Holmes. Rachel Holmes was in Hunt for the Wilder People, and then you had Jacob. I can't remember his last name in Godzilla vs Kong. So they have this like weird New Zealand thing, but again, like, let's get some Japanese actors in here as well. Because Ken Watanabe is one that is severely like needs to be in these type of films to give not just credence to the Japanese folklore aspect to this, but give a distinction about this being a universal thing. I think just having Americans in here, and especially the one girl who's like used as like she's the ethnic girl, and she's deaf, but she has so much importance because she's from this tribe and stuff. The fact that she's unable to speak is an aspect that's interesting to this. Is it very well used? Not compared to its predecessor. So again, let's have her do something like let her be part of the team. I was just hoping that they wouldn't use her disability as something that was going to be elevated to a point where that's why she was special to the plot. Again, I felt it was going to take that aspect of it, which I was quite glad. I was like, oh, just let her be a person.
Well, like the Predator.
I mean, the autistic thing in the Predator is one massive major hindrance of a film that's got major issues. But yeah, I think there's another thing there of using that as an aspect of, because they have a disability or at least are neurodivergent, that must then we can use this into the plot. And granted, it gets quite icky there because we get into the idea of glass and split and how we do that. I don't think that's the conversation. We've already done that, me and Carson. But I do think it's interesting that when we look at these characters of what they can do, they sort of go for the mundane and genre conventional, predictable stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's a conversation we probably should be more profound at talking about. But again, to me, it just showcases that there's an idea here of just lack of. Again, I just question myself every time everyone speaks here. I always wonder myself, like, we've all got different opinions here, but yet nobody has any idea what we're going for next. And there's definitely going to be another one. There has to be. They can't not do this. So I just question myself, like, do I want to go back for a third? I mean, it's like the sixth one now, but in this franchise, I'm like, not really. Not really. I think I'm done with these, which is so disappointing. But we'll have -1 again, I'm sure.
Well, we can get into our final thoughts if we kind of want to go around in a circle and say what our final thoughts and any things that we haven't said yet. Jacob, what are your final thoughts on the film?
Yeah, are we giving our thoughts on the future of the franchise now too?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I thought, because I kind of looked into the numbers. So, like, King of the Monsters made $387 million. Godzilla versus Kong made 470, but that was in 2021, so that was actually pretty good. Kind of COVID rebound numbers, still COVID. But Skull Island made 568 million. So I just was like, okay, if I'm following the money, Kong is at least in this franchise, clearly -1 proves that there's appetite for Godzilla. I just think in this current state, Kong is their character. And I think either you need to go Kong solo film and follow, I think now with Baby Kong, Little Kong, whatever you want to call him, I think that almost kind of back to what Jack's Thor reference, how Thor 4 ends is, right, Thor has the kid, and it looks like, okay, they could go in a God of War direction of like he's raising this kid now and showing them how to be. It feels like that could be the future. I also feel like, too, you either need to just pick between Hollow Earth and Earth. Maybe Godzilla just destroys the world and everyone has to live in Hollow Earth. Or literally anything. Or, like, I think it needs to be on one plane. At one point, I was saying, if this is going to get so ridiculous, can we get Godzilla in space somehow? Like, literally anything but what we want. I mean, I don't know. right? Can we go bigger? If we're going to keep going, right? Just keep. It feels as crazy as we watch of just like stupid. It's like, no, you can get crazy and stupid, but good, or at least compelling and interesting. So I guess those were just kind of my thoughts on. I think, yeah, I like Godzilla more, and that's why I'm like, oh, just let him go, like let him be. But I mean, I think that marketing wise, I feel like Godzilla on the poster does help them. I think that's what they think. So, yeah, overall, did not. I might be with Jack. I don't know if I'll watch another one. They deserve my, I guess. I'll watch the trailer. They deserve that at least. But I don't know. I don't know where the future goes. I think you can do a lot. I just don't think they will, if that's fair.
Sure. Kyle?
Yeah, in terms of the future, I don't know, because my preference would be to scale it back again and do like a 2014 Godzilla again. But like Jack said, they've already built the franchise towards ridiculous, and to kind of go back on that, I feel like is going to be a detriment to the audience, the viewership, and I don't think that it's going to jive with people very well. But that's always where my preference is, because again, I love that sense of scale. I love that sense of impending doom that film captures. And like I have not seen -1 yet, but I've heard that that's what that does a lot. So yeah, I want to say I wouldn't watch another one. I probably would, just out of morbid curiosity, but I'm not excited for it because, like we've said throughout this, it's just a stagnant universe. There's not a lot of growth happening. I would love to see it go as ridiculous as Jacob has suggested it should, because that would be at least something fun to watch. It would be like, okay, that's a reason to go see it on the big screen. But for now, it's not really giving you a reason to go out and see another one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I will watch another one just because I do like want to complete the letterbox list of ranking all of them. They're not quite to DC Universe level, where if the DC Universe didn't just die, I would have stopped watching those because it was just too painful. But still, enough where I'm gonna go watch it and not like it for the next one. My only hope is that it gets crazier. I think that's the only direction this can go. Obviously, in like a vacuum, if I had to say my ideal Kong or my ideal Godzilla movie, this wouldn't be it. But as Jacob mentioned, send them to space. Let's get crazy. Just like have it be absolutely crazy, dumb fun.
If we have
similar
to keep
the
X
Fast and
in the
Furious
title,
franchise.
can we get Elon Godzilla SpaceX,
Sure.
put him to Mars? If we have to keep X, if that's what we're doing, I don't know.
I mean, honestly, throw Vin Diesel doesn't want the Fast and Furious series to die. Throw Fast and Furious versus Kong. Like, I don't care what you do. Just make it dumb fun, and I will at least then have, I'll laugh while I watch it. But I would say the future is bleak as far as this being anything substantially good. But, maybe I'm just a nihilist and we're all going to be wrong. Jack, do you have anything left you would like to say?
Yeah, I just my final thoughts on this film is like what everyone else said. I have no faith in the cinema. I've sort of lost interest, which is disappointing. But I will watch the inevitable sequel. But the problem is that you'll get the announcement, you'll get like the synopsis, you'll get interested, then you'll get the trailer 16 times a day, or how many times you're going to see it on YouTube at the cinema. And then once you watch the film, you've just seen it all. So to me, I can see the direction of it. That being said, there are two ways this will go. I'm telling you, this is what will happen, right? For a fact. The first one is, I think there's going to be one more where there'll be a trilogy of Godzilla vs Kong, right? And I think they'll kill Godzilla off in the next one. And what will happen is they're going to do this thing, and they'll have space involved. Be that if that's back in time with Ghidorah coming down, or something will come out. If it's what they did with the original Godzilla series, where there is like Planet X comes involved and they need help, and there'll be a twist there. They will bring space into it, and they'll resurrect Godzilla for the fourth film. But I'm telling you now, the third film will end with Godzilla dying and space will be involved. And I swear to God, the fourth one will be a Pacific Rim crossover. There is no way that they will not take the opportunity. They'll finish the arc, and then they'll move on to something else crazy. But they have to finish it. The next one, they have to at least have a lineage there. And bar that, they'll bring Pacific Rim in. Partly because Universal need to revive that within the era of the monster movie coming back, with -1 and this, and the horror monster movie taking a little bit of a kick up the arse. That will have to have happened. But also is that it seems to me that it will be the next big thing. It will be like the next evolution that they can do. That's what will be the crazy. It won't be contextual. It won't be Godzilla, like has a wife, or and that they can begin to speak English. I don't think it'll be anything crazy like that. They'll bring it crazy within technical, so they will have to bring Pacific Rim back into it. How that works with rights, I'm not too sure, because they'll have to get rights of Toho, and to make it even worse, and I don't think it's been mentioned, they also licensed the rights of Kong from Universal. So Warner Brothers have got to not only appease one small aspect, and they've also got to appease the overlords at Toho, who quite rightly want to just bring balance to this franchise. Because after a few small mundane hits, with a revamp of Shin Godzilla and now Godzilla -1, Toho can't afford to fuck this up, especially with this was the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. So there's a lot to ride on it, but they'll go crazy and they'll bring a shared universe in again. And who doesn't want to see Ron Perlman and Charlie Day fight with, Rodan or Mothra and stuff? I don't know, but that's what will happen. I think I'll put money on the Godzilla Pacific Rim as well. I'll put money on that. I'm pretty sure that's definitely going to happen.
It is possible. If you want to see Godzilla X Kong, you can go see it in theaters. I think it sounds like we're all recommending it so heavily. So I would recommend. I bet you, if you haven't seen it already, you want to see it. Or if you've already seen it, I bet you want to rewatch it at this point. Let's go to our question of the week, because guys, 2024 is kind of the year of the monkey in cinema. When Year of the Ape, also kind of. We had Monkey Man. We have Kong. We have a Planet of the Apes film coming out. Like, guys, there's a lot of cinematic monkeys and apes. So we're asking, what is your favorite what is your favorite movie? So many M words. What's your favorite movie involving a monkey or ape? In all of history of cinema. Kyle, what is your answer for it?
I feel like I'm gonna go with an obvious one because it's one of the best films ever made, and it's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh wow!
It is the prologue. The prologue of that film with the monkeys figuring out what the whatever the thing is the monolith is one of the most like evocative scenes ever in any movie. So the effects have aged wonderfully for that sequence. It's striking. The music is incredible. It's just one of the best openings to any movie ever. And yeah, so that would be my pick.
Jack, what is your selection?
I was going to go like really niche, like Kyle. I was going to say like Nope, but really, and the more I think about it, genuinely, like, is War of the Planet of the Apes. Take a franchise that takes massive, big risks and also evolves the right way. Like, you could say that Dawn and War are very similar, but there's an emotional evolution there. And I compare it to this, I'm just like, that's how you do it. I would say War of the Planet of the Apes, but we're going to be niche. I'd say Nope. That being said, right, I'm not looking forward to Kingdom, and I think the same thing's going to happen with this franchise. You're going to bring a third party, and he's got no idea about it. I don't trust Wes Ball. I wouldn't, like Jeff Wadlow, I wouldn't trust Wes Ball and Jeff Wadlow to run a bath. I've got no hope in them two whatsoever. But I would probably go Jackson's King Kong, which I think is amazing, the extended cut, and I would also say War of the Planet of the Apes.
Jacob?
I went through a few. I wanted to say best score. I would just wanted to shout out 12 Monkeys score. I just love
done.
That score. But I could not get. I'm with Jack. I couldn't get Dawn of the Planet of the Apes out of my mind. It's one of my favorite sequels. The risk that took. I'm not excited for the next one. So Dawn and War, those are two just. Yeah.
I thought I was safe with no one picking my selection, but then Jack, you had to throw it in. I'm going to go Peter Jackson's King Kong. Yes. I really like the film. I think it's a really underrated film, a true like modern epic. I think it gets the King Kong lore and the point of his character across really well. I think the comedy works quite well. I think Jack Black very rarely is as good as he is in this film. Like, I really like the film. I've not seen the extended cut. I want to check it out, but I really appreciate the film overall, and I would recommend people watch it.
Carson, have you got the opportunity to watch that in 4K?
No.
Right. That film has aged really well. if you watch it in 4K,
Sure.
it's amazing. So I cannot wait to redo a do for that because you're gonna fucking adore that film.
I've never
I gotta-
watched it. I'm gonna have to pop it in pretty soon
Well,
then.
Oh,
come
it's good.
on,
Yeah.
come on, 4K, come on, get it on the big screen. You'll love it. That's aged really well for a film that was really poorly critically, well, not commercially as well. Wasn't very well liked. Really well. What a
Yeah.
great choice. Great minds think alike.
So with that, let's go to our rapid reviews. This is where we talk about anything old or new that we have seen that we haven't talked about yet on the podcast. Jacob, what are your rapid reviews for this week?
Okay, Netflix's Three Body Problem. I like it. I think Benioff and Weiss are in their wheelhouse when they're adapting, and then I had to just look up their names to get them credit as well. Rose Cartwright and Madhuri Shikar, they're writers and creators on that series as well. I think it's compelling sci-fi, compelling TV, and I want people to watch it because I want season 2. So,
Sure. Kyle, what are your rapid reviews?
First Omen, a lot better than I thought it would be.
Mhm.
Actually, very disturbing and scary. It goes very far for a mainstream horror film. Would have preferred it not connect to the original Omen at all because it works well as a standalone, but it's a really, really good film. And then Monkey Man, I loved. I thought it was dirty. I thought it was grimy. I thought that it what I thought was going to be like a John Wick clone kind of turned into something different, much more primal and animalistic. Very very lived in. Dev Patel killed that one.
It has been hell for me to try to get to the theater and watch new releases this year, but I did see a few things. Civil War, which I'm sure Jack is going to get into in a minute. I'll just be brief. I thought, and I wasn't going to watch this film. I literally had no interest in watching it, but everyone was talking about it, including friend of the podcast, Paul Price, who loved it, gave it 5 stars. He was like, "You need to see this," and I was like, "You know what? God damn it, Paul! That's the reason I watched Argyle, because he loved Argyle, and now I'm watching this for you." I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. I didn't give it 1 star. I gave it 2.5. It's not a good film, but not for the reasons I thought. It's not really the political side to it that bothered me. I think it's a really bad film when it comes to screenplay, when it comes to tone. Needle drops you mentioned in this film, the ones in that are awful. I think there are bits here, specifically when it comes to journalism and looking at war journalism and the morals behind that, where like there are hints at something here. But overall, really did not do much for me overall. On Apple TV Plus, I've watched Girls State, which I loved. I thought this was better than Boys State. I was really impressed because it starts very similar, but then it starts to evolve, and I don't really want to spoil it. But they start to break down the actual Girls State program itself, and it starts to evolve into something I thought way more venomous and way stronger. And I thought it was a haunting film. I know there are some messages in here that try to be like, "Oh, you should have hope," but I don't know how anyone could watch this and walk away feeling hopeful about politics or things. It really is like a depressing film. And then finally, I'm not going to go too in depth because our next episode's all about it, but I rewatched and I can finally talk about Challengers. And all I will say is I loved it. 5 stars. I'm a Lucas stan, obviously. And I think this is one of his best. So I'm excited to talk about that next episode. Jack, what are your rapid reviews this week?
I will be very quick here. I watched the Outrage trilogy with Takeshi Kitano, or Takeshi beat Kitano. I think the first one's a masterpiece. I can't believe I waited so long to watch it. The sequel's fine, not as good as the first one. I thought the third one, as a coda, really good. Like the Japanese Godfather. I know that's quite reductive to say, but it was outstanding how he shoots. Like he shoots the first film like a horror film, but in a gangster tone. Everyone needs to go out and watch the first Outrage if you're able to do it. I watched a lot of old stuff, but Shanghai Express. I finished my Universal Monster stuff, so I watched Creature of the Black Lagoon sequel, and then its third film, The Raven, Black Cat, Black Friday. Which Black Friday is really good for like film like Face Off, John Woo's Face Off, like in the 50s. Go watch that; it's really good. Civil War. I don't want to talk about Civil War too much because I've got like 1,800 words. I'm not even anywhere close to finishing. What a reductive pile of just shite. I agree with you, Carson. The politics in this film are being hyped up to be something it's nothing. It quite clearly is like a left-leaning film. I have nothing wrong with that. I'm not right-wing whatsoever. So I'm going to be like start thinking like the travesty. To hype up a film about its politics and say absolutely nothing in it, to me, is such a reductive mess. The screenplay is horrendous. From Alex Garland, who is a writer, I thought I could not believe it. It's a series of vignettes of just like tension and tension and tension, and we get to the final 15 minutes, and everybody knows where it's going to go. I honestly was like watching it in the cinema, and it's like the Tenet thing where I went left, I was like, oh, this is a 4-star film. Got in the car, it was a 3. Got home, it was a 2. Started writing it. I'm genuinely at a 1. I think it's so disappointing to watch that, and considering it's going to be his last film. But I went to France last week, so I watched obviously The Matrix Resurrections, because I watched the anniversary, 25th, 30th anniversary of The Matrix. I watched that as well, which I thought was excellent. Anyone But You, I thought was really good. I watched the 1977 version of The Hobbit, which I never watched it. I watched some Charles Bronson stuff. I had to watch A View to a Kill in Paris, because why not? Then we had to watch Scoop to see how much this country is an absolute mess. Some James Whale prep, Carson, for what's coming up, The Old Dark House, which is always interesting. Ghost in the Shell 2. I watched The Farley Brothers, The Three Stooges, and I thought it was really funny. So I'll probably have to just leave myself into a dark room and question stuff. Attack of Titan, the live action double films, they were poor. Red Dawn sequel, original was very good. Sequel was very poor. I watched Vampires by John Carpenter. That was excellent. I never thought I would say that about James Woods. And that's really it. And then the Roadhouse movies. I've reviewed the remake for Clapper. That's going to go out probably tonight, the next day. And then I watched the original. So they were interesting. But yeah, I also watched Girls' Day. I thought it was fascinating, but genuinely frightening death. But yeah, those will be my rapid reviews.
So you didn't really watch a lot, it sounds like.
No,
Not really a lot of
I didn't
films.
all watch that in France. That's like a build-up.
What a fun vacation to France it sounds like you had. Just watched 30 films there. So I think that's going to do it today. Thank you all so much for joining the podcast, and thank you so much for listening at home. Where can we find everyone on social media? Kyle?
If you like me, you can follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kyle Krieghbaum. That's Krieghbaum.
Jacob?
Yeah, find me on X or Twitter, Jacob_R_Allen.
Jack?
You can find me on X and Letterboxd with the username at Jak-Luke Sharp.
And you can find me on Twitter at BP_movie reviews, Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week for a special bonus episode where me and Paul Price are reviewing every single Taylor Swift performance. And then you can find the next week we'll be reviewing Challengers. It's an interesting, time, Jack. But with that, thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.